So a funny thing happened to me recently. I was over at my parents' house, and my dad pointed at my phone and asked me if I had gotten a new device. And I had, but I kind of didn't want to say what phone I had gotten, because after years of preaching out against Apple products, the phone I was carrying with me was the iPhone 12. Now, I've been pretty vocal about my disdain for Apple products. Not because I necessarily dislike the products, but because Apple's political views and ethical values seep into their technology that they're making. For example, if you use their web browser, you're more likely to find results for political agendas that support Apple's political views. And it's come to light in recent years that they will filter out certain opinions in your web results to kind of favor their opinions. Beyond that, things like planned obsolescence, which, if you're not familiar, is the idea that whenever you buy an iPhone or a MacBook or something like that, they are built to become less effective over the next few years. So that after 2 or 3 years of using a product, they start to work at a point where you need to upgrade, or they try to force you to upgrade by saying certain features will not work until you get the next device in line. And that's never struck me the right way. I feel like when you get a device, you should have a certain amount of support behind it for a certain number of years. And if you can't rely on that, then why would you buy that device in the first place? You should buy something that the people that are distributing the device will stand behind for at least a handful of years. It shouldn't be 2 years and then, well, sorry, we're gonna stop supporting that device now. And a lot of people will get more use than a couple years out of a device. I've seen people that are still using iPhone 5s, iPhone 6s, and that's perfectly fine. And if you can make that work, that's great. But more often than not, what I see is battery life, processing, both take a hit, and apps just stop working altogether. And they say to use this app, please upgrade to the iPhone 7, the iPhone 10, whatever the case may be. So you might be asking, for a person like me, how did I end up with an iPhone? Well, the answer to that is twofold. First, and most importantly for me, is financially. We were hit, my wife and I, in kind of the perfect storm where we were able to upgrade to the newest iPhone and also save about $35 on our monthly phone bills. That alone was enough for me to kind of swallow my pride enough to at least take a chance on this new device. Money makes you do weird things sometimes. The second reason, as a technology enthusiast, I felt it was necessary to judge a device based on the way the device performs and what I should expect out of it, rather than my bias toward the company and the way they run things. Now, I haven't used an iPhone since the iPhone 4 back in 2010, so it's been over a decade since I've had a real chance to use an iPhone as my daily driver and see what kind of advances they have made, both in the hardware and software departments. I've played around with other people's iPhones whenever they have issues because I'm still kind of the on-call tech support guy for family and friends. But I haven't had a chance to actually use it myself, to learn the ins and outs and figure out what exactly works for me and what doesn't work for me, as someone who has been kind of a diehard Android loyal for over a decade. So I felt the need to try it out for myself and see if I could prove myself wrong. See if this was a device that, after all these years of improvements and changes, they could win me back over. My first 24 hours gave me a pretty good impression. I spent that time organizing the layout so that it fit kind of my minimalist preferences and learning the new gesture controls that were slightly different from Android's. Not everything went so smoothly though. First, I want to talk about some frustrations I had with the device, and we'll get to the positives, and I want to focus on those at the end of the video to leave you on a higher note. So let's get the lower end out of the way first. I really wish that customization were better. It has improved by yards, but it's still not quite where I want it to be. Normally, I like to take and organize my screen so that it fits the background and my personal preferences. With Apple, they still expect the app to go to the top left position that it can fit into where there's an empty space. I was able to kind of remedy this partially by just putting all of the apps that I use as essential apps into separate folders and placing them in the dock at the bottom of the screen. But as soon as I try to add another app or move a folder out of the dock, it automatically goes to the top left spot. I really wish that I were able to place apps and folders where I want them rather than the phone telling me where I have to place them. I also want to talk about the organization of the app drawer. While I'm a huge fan of the fact that they have an app drawer now, they still have control over how that app drawer is organized. Yes, you can tap on the search bar to pull up an alphabetical list of your apps instead, but that feels like an extra step. I wish that the alphabetical list were the default, or even better, them giving you the option to organize it into folders of your choosing, rather than them giving you folders that they feel like are best for you. Next, I want to talk about defaults, because Apple has set some truly baffling defaults for this phone. The one that struck me as the most odd was that out of the box, your volume buttons don't actually change the volume of the phone permanently. Whenever you hit the volume buttons, it will change what's immediately on your screen, whether it be an Instagram video, a YouTube video, music, but as soon as you swap to something new, it shifts back to where it was. I found out later, after an embarrassingly long amount of time in a Google search, that you have to go into the settings and toggle a switch that turns your volume buttons into your actual permanent volume buttons. If you don't do that, you're only turning up the single song or video or sound clip that is on your screen at the time. Then it'll go back to your previously set volume. That seems backwards to me. I feel like your volume buttons should be volume buttons first, and you can toggle that if you want. Being able to toggle your switches, though, is always good, and that didn't happen for me. There were times where I was trying to, say, Chromecast a movie, and the phone would just forget that I was trying to Chromecast. As soon as I would leave the app, I couldn't rewind or pause from the control center, and whenever I tried pulling the app back up, it would kick me out of the movie and start it over from the beginning, rather than letting me interact with it where it was at. That's frustrating enough on its own, but being in a home with a pregnant wife and dogs, this popped up with a frustrating consistency. I kept having to go help my wife or let the dogs out, only to come back and not be able to rewind. And I'd have to start the movie over and fast forward to where I wanted to go to see the part that I had missed. These are some of the primary issues that I had. I could continue to nitpick about small things, but it's starting to become just about personal preference for me. Now, I want to talk about some of the positives I have about this phone, because as much as some things do frustrate me, it does some things really well. I need to mention a caveat to this review, though, and say that my brother, my own resident Apple fan, told me that the newest update to the iPhone can be kind of buggy and silly. He said that him and his girlfriend have also had issues with some of the functionality of iOS in its current state, and to not judge it too harshly. This actually made me feel a lot better, because I can be pretty forgiving of software bugs as long as the hardware is good and the software eventually gets fixed. Just for reference, my daily driver before the iPhone was a Surface Duo, and that had enough bugs that it should probably just be fumigated before anyone uses it. With that said, I want to talk about some of the good things about the iPhone. First and foremost, the design. It feels really good in your hand. It feels premium, it feels easy to hold, and it feels sturdy. I mostly baby my electronics, and I was gingerly holding it and carefully placing it on things until I was able to get a case and a screen protector for it. But I truly believe that if I had dropped this phone before I had gotten it protected, it probably would have survived it without any damage. They've touted this new iPhone as being the most durable that they've ever created, using bits of ceramic rather than an all-glass body. And I do believe that. It feels good and premium in your hand while also feeling like it could stand up to more than they could in the past. It also just feels incredibly usable. It's intuitive, it's smart, and it's helpful. When we were out shopping and my phone reminded me of where we had parked our car just in case that I had forgotten, I immediately thought how helpful that would be in a situation where we were allowed to go back to theme parks eventually. It also has smart widgets that you can use that automatically switch themselves based on context and time of day. This means that it follows your routine and learns how you normally use the iPhone during a day. And whenever you open up your phone, the widget will show you your schedule or the weather or your commute based on what it thinks you need. And most of the time in my experience, this has worked really well, but I haven't had it long enough to see if there's any weirdness to that. Battery is generally phenomenal on this phone. Coming from some of the top Android flagships, I was used to battery dying pretty quickly, and I'd have to top off my phone at midday around lunch if I wanted to make sure it would last me through my day. With this phone, granted, I haven't had to use it over a long day without charging it, but I feel like I could make it really easily without worrying about it. It just keeps on going, and whenever I think that I'm at 50% or 30%, I check it, and it turns out I'm still at about 85%. I feel like whenever I do get back to a long workday schedule, it's just going to be fantastic, and I'm not going to have to worry about topping it off at midday the way I always did with the Surface Duo or some of the latest Galaxy phones or even the Pixels. The screen also needs to be talked about. It's an OLED panel, and it's only 60 hertz. It feels very basic. It feels like, the kind of panel that you should see in a lot of phones. What makes it good is not just that it's an OLED, but because iOS and all the apps are so locked down and optimized by Apple and their crew, it feels smooth. In most 60 hertz panels I see on Android phones, it starts to feel kind of sluggish and choppy. On the iPhone, even though it's running at the same frames per second, it feels fast and it feels smooth because everything is running so efficiently that you don't get that jagginess that you sometimes can on Android on lower hertz panels. This means that the iPhone, while using the same technology, feels better. So, with some of these things said, what are my thoughts moving forward? Well, I'm planning on keeping the iPhone in my pocket for the time being. I do understand why so many people really like them. They're incredibly usable, they're very attractive, and they just work. I've always been the kind of person that likes to play with my technology, fiddle with my technology. It's more fun to me to have a problem to solve on an Android phone than have an iPhone that just works. But as my life is getting increasingly more busy, and I have less hours to spend with my wife, with our dogs, with our soon-to-be child, my priorities are starting to change. I'm finding that some of these things that I used to love working on are becoming things I have to work on now. And with the iPhone, I just don't. I can pull it out, use it quickly and efficiently, and I don't have to worry about, the bugs or the beta launchers or things like that I always had with the Surface Duo. Not to say that I didn't love the Surface Duo, and I'm still keeping it close by just in case I decide to switch back to it, because I know me and the way that I love tinkering with things. It could very well be that once the infatuation stage with the iPhone is over, I'll quickly be going back to Android and the operating system that I love. I still think Android's customization makes it the better operating system. It just takes longer to get used to, and you have to find a layout and a workflow that works for you. iOS doesn't give you that capability, but in taking away your options, it also makes it easier to do things on, right out of the box. For the time being, this is going to keep being my daily driver. If I switch back, I'll let you know. But in the meantime, I'd be interested in your thoughts. Have you recently switched either from iPhone to Android or vice versa? What are your thoughts? Have you noticed any other bugs or issues that maybe I haven't encountered yet? Until the next video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.